Good morning, dear colleagues, members of the civil society. I declare open the resumed session of the Committee on Non-Governmental Organizations and call to order the 17th meeting. I want to thank everyone in the room, interpreters, secretariat, Public Information Department for the hard work and the very important support you are providing us with to be able to accomplish our task. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to welcome you back to this 2018 resumed session after a very demanding session in January and several informal meetings we held, during which we have discussed various issues pertinent to the committee's work. I would also like to acknowledge and thank representatives of the NGOs who have come to attend our session here in New York and are available to take part in the question and answer session scheduled, as all you know, from 5 to 6 p.m. every day. Civil society continued to have a crucial role in the implementation of the 2030 agenda, especially at the local level. It would be impossible to achieve the goals of the agenda, to implement the agenda. No agenda without civil society. So that's why the work of this committee is particularly important to give a better platform to open the door to civil society, to the UN system, and enable civil society, UN, work together for a better future. We have a packed agenda ahead of us. For this session, the committee will consider 228 new applications for consultative status and 244 applications deferred from previous sessions of the committee. And in addition, the committee has before it 204 quadrennial reports from the NGO in general or special consultative status, and 84 quadrennial reports deferred from previous sessions. There are also several new and deferred requests for reclassifications, mergers, and change of names. This permanent increase in the number of applications and reports, it's a clear indication of the strong interest of the NGOs in participating in the UN policies and decision-making processes. Also, it's a natural response to the demands of the current world and its problems. As the body responsible for facilitating the access and participation of NGOs to ECOSOC and its subsidiary bodies, as well as UN meetings and events, our role is crucial, and we are increasingly called upon to do more. It is therefore encouraging that the committee has commenced discussions on the review of its methods of work with a view of enhancing its overall efficiency. However, even as we continue to deliberate on our working methods, the steady growth of our workload requires the adoption of a more streamlined approach to our work. In this regard, I would like to point out the large number of deferred applications from the regular session this year, largely due to the fact that we did not proceed a second review of new and deferred applications. We did not have enough time, which was unfortunate. It's happening from the first time. regarding the practice of the committee. Under these circumstances and in the light of the high volume of work, the committee will need to move expeditiously during the session to ensure that all applications are given adequate consideration. I and the members of the Bureau are fully committed to ensuring an efficient and productive session. The expectations placed upon the committee are very high, and I'm confident that by working together in the usual spirit of cooperation, we will be able to conclude a highly successful session. Thank you so much. Now it's my pleasure to invite the Director of the Office for Intergovernmental Support and Coordination for Sustainable Development, Department of Economic and Social Affairs, Madame Marion Barthélemy, to make a statement. You have the floor, Madame.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a great pleasure for me to address the Committee on Non-Governmental Organizations in my new capacity as the Director of the Office for Intergovernmental Support and Coordination for Sustainable Development. We just changed names, so we are all struggling with our new names and acronyms. But this office is part of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, and as you know, it hosts the NGO branch which supports your committee. As the chairman said, with the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in September 2015, we have seen a new impetus to civil society involvement in the work of the United Nations. And this comes in part from the way the agenda was elaborated, which was in a uniquely inclusive fashion in the history of the UN. So now that we are in this phase of implementation, we need equally important mobilization of civil society actors to reach the Sustainable Development Goals and to hold the international community accountable on its commitments. It is noteworthy that since the agenda was adopted, the number of non-governmental organizations applying for consultative status with ECOSOC has increased. In 2014, we had 440 applications, and this number steadily increased. It has now reached 774 applications for the 2018 cycle, which is a record number. Since the beginning of this decade, the rate of increase in applications has been higher for organizations coming from developing countries. It was 36% compared to the increase for NGOs from developed countries, which has been 25%. As a result, the number of applications from the south and from the north among all the applications is equal. But we still need to make further efforts to reach out to organizations from the south and ensure that the overall number of applications reflects the demographic structure of the world population. So with this sharp increase in the number of applications, there has been a corresponding increase in the workload of the NGO branch. So as a result, this session, there is a backlog of 100 applications which couldn't be reviewed in time for the resumed session, and they will be considered in the next cycle. In the same way, the number of quadriennial reports submitted by NGOs in status has increased, and now we reached a record number of 1,105 quadriennial reports for 2019, which will be 300 more than this year. The branch is also increasingly solicited by NGOs in status to get information and support on how best to contribute to the work of the UN. The consultations that the committee will hold for the first time on 22 June illustrate the need for more interaction between intergovernmental processes and civil society, so that both worlds understand and profit from each other's contributions in a spirit of partnerships. New technologies can greatly facilitate the work of the NGO branch and accelerate the administrative treatment of applications and quadrennial reports. And our department has engaged in the elaboration of a new integrated platform which should eventually replace our current systems. This is really important because our current platforms are close to 10 years of age and they have a limited lifespan. So we absolutely need to invest in these new tools for the continuity of the work of the NGO branch and for this committee. We will probably need to come back to the member states given the cost of those operations. The methods of work of the committee will also need to be adjusted to comply with this increased workload, and I can assure you that we are all here to support you. I would like to thank the acting chief, Marc-André Dorel, and his team. They worked very hard in preparation for the session against very tight deadlines in order to give to the committee the kind of support that it deserves. Mr. Chairman, at the moment, the General Assembly is reviewing the resolution on the strengthening of the Economic and Social Council, which is Resolution 68-1. And this resolution precisely emphasizes the important role that the Council plays as a platform for multi-stakeholder participation and as a platform for engaging all relevant actors in its work. And many see this review as an opportunity to enhance the role of civil society actors in the work of the ECOSOC system. As the world needs the mobilization of all actors to move forward on the path that was decided by the world leaders in 2015, civil society should not be disappointed. And the work of this committee will no doubt contribute to this legitimate aspiration. I wish you the best for a fruitful and productive session. Thank you.
I thank Madame Barthélémy for your remarks. Now the floor is open if any of the members wishes to make a statement regarding what has been said. Otherwise, we continue the agenda. Yes, I see. El distinguido representante de Cuba.
The distinguished representative of Cuba has the floor. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Good day. Good day to each and every colleague here in the hall. My delegation is very happy to have had the presentation by the director on the submission of the work of the NGOs and the situation of the work before the NGOs. We've taken note with great appreciation of the observations that have been made. We adopted the agenda of 2030. Ever since then, there's been a tremendous increase in the interest of non-governmental organizations. More and more want to contribute to the work of the United Nations and contribute to the work of ECOSOC. Obviously, we appreciate this. And also we agree that the United Nations has to work to increase the presence of organizations from the South. There's quite an imbalance at the present time. Many organizations with consultative status come from the North. And we've got to have more from the South. They have to make their contribution to the organization. that will lead to much better results. Also, we note that there's been an increase in the amount of work. Although the amount of work has increased during these years, the number of organizations that have been given consultative status has also increased, and the documents that the Secretariat has circulated have shown this. The chart is clear. The committee has given or recommended consultative status to a greater number of organizations than before. My delegation would like to add an additional thought on this subject. The amount of work has increased together with the responsibilities of the NGOs. We shouldn't take this lightly. We have a tremendous volume of work ahead of us. Every application should be carefully considered. The large amount of work should not mean that we should be negligent as we carry out our responsibilities. We have to consider carefully each application. We have a much greater responsibility than before. We also have looked at the report on quadrennial reports. That's increased. We're happy it has increased. This means, surely, that organizations are carrying out their responsibilities. They are submitting quadrennial reports to the committee, and that is in line with the requirements that we've had. We haven't yet managed to get all organizations, however, who have consultative status to abide by these requirements. Not yet. The platforms which we've used are virtual platforms. My delegation understands that the virtual platform has been very useful. It's been of great importance. It's been of great importance for the work of the committee. It makes it easier for us to get through our work efficiently. We'd like to congratulate the Secretariat for working so swiftly. It brings documents up to date very quickly, and that helps us with our digital information. The historical archives are then kept up to date. We've had records going back 4 or 5 years, and they are available. But we do notice that, regrettably, the digital archive begins in 2003. From then on, there's no digital record of the committee from 2002 backwards. Digitalization of this information is a lot of work, a tremendous amount of work. And obviously this means funds must be available. That is a matter of consideration. We would share this thought with the director, and I think that the proper people in the United Nations will take the appropriate action. However, the archives, given the situation, the paper archives, well, we've got to have it. If the information is not available on the digital surface, there's got to be some place where we can get the historical record of the committee. Otherwise, my delegation simply doesn't know what's happened. And we would ask the Secretariat if it is possible to have the digital history, the history of each and every session of the committee, every application that's been made. That's really very important. My delegation believes that it is vital that we have the digital archive or a paper record of the original application, the original request of each NGO in the committee. It's important that we have this information. It shows how each organization entered the ECOSOC family, what happened at the time, how it is going to contribute. It's important to have this information. This way we can evaluate the work that the organization is truly doing. So, we must keep the historical memory, so to speak, of the committee. So once again, we appreciate the presentation of the director. We'd like to thank each and every one of you and wish you a very successful session. I thank the distinguished representative of Cuba for his statement, and I thank him for his contribution to the work of the committee. Thank you very much.
I see the distinguished representative of the United States. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you also to the Secretariat for the work and effort that has gone into planning for this 2018 resumed session, and good morning, colleagues. The United States strongly supports both the participation of civil society and faith-based organizations in the work of the United Nations and giving them a voice in the UN system. For this reason, we look forward to the long overdue consultation with NGOs in consultative status on June 22nd. This provision of ECOSOC Resolution 1996-31 must become a regular practice. The NGO committee should hold these consultations before each committee session as the resolution mandates. It is essential that civil society be able to engage with the body mandated with reviewing their applications. Specious attempts to restrict civil society's participation here at the UN go against this committee's mandate. We also commend ECOSOC's decisions to accredit two U.S.-based NGOs, the U.S. Committee for Human Rights in North Korea and the Iran Human Rights Documentation Center during the ECOSOC Coordination and Management meeting in April. We applaud all member states who supported these decisions. While these were positive outcomes, the process for getting these immensely qualified NGOs consultative status highlights an ongoing issue: the NGO Committee's continued failure to effectively fulfill its mandate. The NGO Committee is mandated to review the applications of NGOs, but must do so under the framework of ECOSOC Resolution 1996-31. Far too frequently, this body asks civil society questions about their registration and countries of operation, the reasons for choosing to focus their work in a particular country, or the reasons for choosing the area or focus of their work. These and many other questions are unacceptable and are not in line with Resolution 1996-31. This body blocks far too many qualified NGOs from receiving consultative status as a result. This is particularly true of groups focused on human rights and humanitarian issues. It is for this reason the United States has taken action to move the applications of qualified NGOs forward. We call upon all members of the committee to reaffirm their commitment to upholding Resolution 1996-31 and to act accordingly. We are also increasingly concerned that NGOs receiving any government funding are blocked and labeled as government-organized, non-governmental organizations, or GONGOs, while actual GONGOs, organizations that operate wholly at the direction of a member state's authorities, have proliferated. There is no provision of ECOSOC Resolution 1996-31 preventing NGOs from receiving multiple sources of funding, including from government sources. What should concern us in this committee is effective government control over these organizations. We are pleased to see that the number of NGOs applying for ECOSOC consultative status continues to grow, an indication of the significance and impact that this status has for NGOs worldwide. We urge our fellow committee members to work towards reviewing and accrediting as many of these qualified NGOs as possible. We are thankful that in past sessions, the chair of the committee has proposed...
Sorry for the interruption. I see the distinguished colleague from Cuba with a point of order. Please, if it's a point of order, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. President. It's a point of order by my delegation. We were talking about the director. The interpretation by the United States doesn't have anything to do with the statement made. It's about something else. So we would ask that the delegation of the United States confine herself to the debate and deal with this elsewhere on the agenda. We're trying to focus on the discussion that we should be having. I thank the distinguished delegation of Cuba.
U.S. to continue your speech, and the committee has heard the point of order by Cuba. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to continue my statement, please. Thank you. We urge our fellow committee members to work towards reviewing and accrediting as many of these qualified NGOs as possible. We are thankful that in past sessions, the chair of the committee has imposed strict time limits to ensure all applications can be considered, and we hope this practice will continue. Finally, in the 2019 to 2022 term, we look forward to working with new members, as well as those committee members who were re-elected.
I'm sorry again. I would appreciate if we could take into account what has been said and continue this general statement when we start with the agenda, if you don't mind, unless you want to make some comments related to what the director has said. I apologize, but it was requested as a point of order, and we should proceed accordingly. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is it your interpretation then that the statement, that I cannot continue my statement?
Oh, well, it's up to the committee, but I think you can continue your statement in the agenda item, general statements or working methods, or because I have offered the floor to talk about the comments made by the director, Madame Barthélemy. So I don't know if you have some points regarding what she has said. It's okay, it's welcome. If you want to talk about the work of the committee and the working methods and the other aspects, it should be somewhere else, later.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that explanation. I'm happy to make my statement at a time that you think would be more appropriate according to the agenda.
I thank you, the U.S. representative, for your cooperation and flexibility. And now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Iran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, colleagues. We also would like to thank Secretariat for all the preparations for this resumed session of the NGO committee. We also would like to thank and recognize the comments made by Madam Director on the workload of the, committee and the Secretariat. We recognize very much that, and we are also interested to find ways both to improve the working method of the NGO committee and addressing the increasing workload of the NGO, of the Secretariat. Meanwhile, we would like to emphasize the importance of granting status to genuine NGOs, and the committee has shown during its recent sessions that it has some such indeed intention to increase as well the number of the NGOs with the status. We also recognize the important role that NGOs play in implementation of internationally agreed development agenda, including the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development and other important documents. I'm obliged to react to what has been just said by the representative of the United States, which in our understanding, another attempt by that delegation to politicize the work of the committee. And in fact, the ECOSOC April session was a clear reflection of this politicization attempt and double standard taken by the United States.
If you allow me, distinguished delegate, yes. If your speech is not related to what has been said, you have another time to deliver a speech.
Yes, we will get to that, of course. Putting pressure on member states to disregard provisions of Resolution 1996/31 and the provisions of Charter of the United Nations is a disservice to the work of the NGO committee, and this is in fact weakening the role of the committee for political ends that has nothing to do with civil society space and the role that it can play. We very much, in fact, are disappointed by the statement made by the United States delegation at the beginning of this session, and we would like to request member states to avoid such politicization. And we all know that this has nothing to do with the civil society, with the work of the NGO committee, and it has everything to do with the political ends and political intention of the United States. Thank you.
Agradezco al distinguido representante.
I thank the distinguished representative of Iran for his statement. I'd like to ask members of the committee to be kind enough to try to adapt their statements and speeches to the subject that is properly before us. If we start straying from the agenda right from the beginning, we are going to have a complicated meeting. I'm sure that everybody's quite capable of working in a cooperative way, in an efficient way. I'm sure that we're all quite capable of doing that. I'm sure we can go through the various stages of the agenda appropriately and in that way do things appropriately. The time will come when everybody can say what they feel is necessary. There will be a time for that. There'll be a time for general statements. There'll be a time for partial statements about individual subjects. But if you start talking about the general policies of the committee, when what we're trying to do is focus on what the Director Barthélemy said, that's not a good situation. Please excuse me for talking like this. I now will call on, if there are no others who wish to speak, the distinguished delegate of Austria. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I will fully heed your call and be very much on topic here. And thanks a lot for this useful presentation by the director. From the perspective of an observer state, I would like to ask, or maybe also make a call that you use your plans of establishing a new platform through which the committee will conduct its work to also increase the transparency for non-members, for us observers. I believe that we've seen in the past years that more and more observers actually attend the sessions of the NGO committee, which certainly reflects the great interest that we all have in that the NGO committee conducts its important work and its important mission. But for us observers, very often it's very hard to follow the work, as we have very little insight as to which applications will be handled at what point in time, in what session, and so that it would be very useful for us, of course, not to have full access to the database. We understand and respect that we are not members of the committee, but as of now, we don't know which applications are going to be are on which list. We don't know which list is going to be handled when, and so if maybe we can use the very important modernization of the working methods also to better include us humble observers in your work. I think this would be very beneficial for all of us. Thank you very much.
Agradezco al distinguido.
I thank the distinguished representative of Austria for that statement.
Colegas.
Distinguished colleagues, we have completed this stage. I now ask the committee to take up agenda item 1 of the provisional agenda. Election of officers. This is in document E, C2, 2018-1, revision 1. As you will recall, at the earlier session, Madam Hosgur of Turkey was elected on behalf of the countries of Eastern Europe, and Mr. Farid Jalab Asraran on behalf of the countries of Western Europe. Their vice chairman, Mr. Havijalib Ajabayran, will continue as rapporteur. I'd like to remind the countries of Africa and the countries of Pacific Asia that they should propose their representatives for the other posts as soon as possible. We would appreciate it very much if you did that. Having disposed of this, let us proceed to agenda item 2, adoption of the agenda and other organizational matters. Distinguished delegates, as you will recall, the agenda for 2018 appears in the document I've just mentioned. It was approved by the committee at its regular session in January. So, I would invite the committee to consider the draft agenda, to continue consideration of the agenda, which is in the working document number 1. Does anybody have any observations to make? May I take it? The committee wishes to approve the working document appearing in document E1 in its orally revised version. It may be modified, that is the understanding, as the committee proceeds in its work during the current session. There are no objections. The agenda is adopted. Thank you very much. I now would invite the committee to consider the provisional working agenda, which appears in document number 1. Would anybody like to make any observations? May I take it that the committee wishes to approve the provisional agenda for work? No objections? It is so decided. Thank you very much.
Me permito invitar al comité a comenzar.
I'd like to invite the committee to begin agenda item 7, consideration of special reports. We haven't received any reports thus far. The distinguished representative of China has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Under this agenda item, China has already asked for the revocation of the consultative status of the Society of Threatened People. In accordance with the procedures and decisions of the committee, we have already sent you a note of avoir. This note has been distributed to the members of the committee. I'm confident all the members of the committee have already had a look at it. Why we are asking for the revocation of the consultative status of this organization, our note of avoir has clearly explained the reasons. I'm not going to repeat what was said in the note of avoir. I'd like to emphasize the following 3 points. First, the Society of Threatened Peoples allow the terrorists from China, Dolqun, to attend the various meetings of the UN, including the recent the UN Forum on Indigenous Issues. Dolqun is a terrorist designated in 2003 by the Chinese government. He's implicated in organizing and leading terrorist activities and has planned the rescue and the financing of terrorists. He was vice president of the Eastern Turkestan Liberation Organization, which was on the list of terrorism by the Security Council. He has masterminded and carried out various terrorist activities inside China, including bombing and hijacking and assassinations. He is a terrorist in every manifestation. He himself, on December 14, 1995, in Ankara, Turkey, he openly claimed responsibility for planning and organizing terrorist bombings in Xinjiang in China. Secondly, he and his organization have been clamoring for the independence of Xinjiang. And he is now serving as the president of the World Uyghur Congress. And this Congress has its aim, the establishment of so-called East Turkestan. And their acts seriously threatened the sovereignty and territorial integrity of China. So far as I know, the Society of Threatened People is also in support the acts that threaten the sovereignty and territorial integrity of other countries. All these have shown that the act of this society is running counter to the purposes and principles of UN Charter. Thirdly, Dolqun, during his participation on 25th April on the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues here, though he received credentials registered at the Society of Threatened People, however, in the dialogue and in the list, he claimed himself to be coming from the World Uyghur Congress. And this World Uyghur Congress doesn't have any consultative status, and this Congress was not allowed to participate at this dialogue. The act itself has demonstrated either Dolqun or either the Society of Threatened People or both through deception and lies smuggled Dolqun into the dialogue. So all these acts are in violation of the norms and procedures of the United Nations. In accordance with the Resolution 1996/30 of the ECOSOC Council, 31 of ECOSOC Council. This organization is not up to its consultative status. Is not qualified, so we ask for the revocation of this status. We should have asked for the decision this first day of our committee to revoke the status of this organization. However, we'd like to follow the procedures and practices of the committee to give this organization an opportunity for the written responses to our inquiries. Asking this organization to provide the written responses by Friday this week in order to enable us to take the appropriate decision on Friday. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Agradezco al distinguido.
I thank the distinguished representative of China for his statement. In accordance with procedural rules, the organization does have the opportunity to respond, and so this organization will be contacted by the Secretariat, and on Friday we will be able to return to this subject when we do deal with specific official reports. That is our understanding, and if there are no objections, we will proceed in this way. And now we will continue with our agenda. Does anybody have any comments in this connection? I see
United States. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the course of action that you've laid out. In response to what China's just said, I'd like to read from the report of the Secretary General. This is document A/HRC/36/31, distributed 29 March 2018. Again, this is a report of the Secretary General of the United Nations. This is not an NGO report or a media press report. And if you'll just indulge me to read one paragraph. It says, on 26 April 2017, a Uyghur human rights activist and member of the Unrepresented Nations and Peoples Organization, Dolqun Isa, who was attending the annual Permanent Forum on Indigenous Peoples at United Nations headquarters, was escorted from the premises pending further examination following the receipt of information from representatives of China alleging security reasons. As a result, Mr. Isa was unable to resume his participation in the forum. This was last year, and this is from a report on reprisals against human rights defenders. And it is very clear what is happening today is yet again an act of reprisals, and the committee is being asked to be an accomplice to this activity. We're very concerned about this action. We're very concerned about the allegations that the Chinese have made. This letter was circulated obviously very late on Friday evening so that many delegations didn't have time to come prepared with comments today. We also understand that this individual was given a badge and did participate. And if there were concerns raised, we understand that UN security takes its protocol very seriously. So one of the things we would request, Mr. Chair, is that you invite UN security to come and brief us on the information that they have about this individual. Because obviously he was given a badge. As the Chinese say, he did participate in the forum. This is after last year's allegations, again, documented in the UN's own Secretary General's report. So we're very concerned, Mr. Chairman, about this approach. We agree that the NGO needs to be given time to respond, and so given until Friday for them to present their information and response is appropriate, and the committee should give due process and listen to those concerns. But we do believe that we need to hear from various other entities. If there really is terrorist concerns, then all of us need to be made aware of that. The United States, for speaking on its own behalf, would not have given a visa to this individual to come into the United States if he really was going to commit terrorist activities. And we know that the UN Diplomatic Security Office would also not put all of us at risk if there really was a terrorist threat, as the Chinese have claimed today. So, Mr. Chairman, we'd like to hear that information. We would like to receive some further evidence so that this committee is not an accomplice to reprisals. We are very concerned about this. And again, this seems like an extremely clear-cut case for us, clearer than we've ever been faced with before. We have the SG's own report here, and we hope that each member of this committee will take a moment to look at this and read this tonight. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the U.S., and as you request, the Secretariat will contact the security, and we will have some more information for Friday's session to deal with this subject. I don't see other member. I see the again, China, you want the floor? You have the floor.
I think let the other members make the statement first.
I see just Germany and the European Union. Germany, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, we are surprised to learn at very short notice about an attempt to withdraw the consultative status of the Society for Threatened Peoples during the resumed session that started today. Let me just say a few words why we would request to withdraw this proposal. First of all, the Society for Threatened People is an independent human rights organization that works, among other issues, on human rights and advocates for threatened ethnic and religious minorities and indigenous communities. It has its seat in Germany. It received ECOSOC special consultative status in 1993 and has since then participated in various UN meetings, including several times at the Permanent Forum of Indigenous Issues. Mr. Dolqun Isa was correctly registered as a representative of the Society for Threatened Peoples at the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues. Mr. Isa has been a member of the Society for Threatened Peoples for several years. The Society for Threatened Peoples has many members that belong to minorities or indigenous peoples. It is absolutely common that at the same time some are members of other organizations. Second, the allegations of terrorist activities or links to terrorist organizations against Mr. Isa are, from our point of view, unfounded. These allegations have been made for quite some time already, but they have never been substantiated. UN security would not have issued a badge for Mr. Isa if there were any valid security risks. The UN Secretariat at the highest levels has looked at the case and didn't find any reason why Mr. Isa should not be allowed in. The so-called evidence submitted by one member state proved to be irrelevant. In the same vein, an earlier so-called Interpol red notice, which is not an arrest warrant but an international alert, was lifted in February after very serious deliberations. Mr. Isa is also a German citizen, and German security authorities possess no information, I repeat, no information, that he might pose a security risk. All of this does not warrant the withdrawal of the organization's status, quite the contrary. The attempted withdrawal of the consultative status of the Society for Threatened Peoples is a very unfortunate attempt at reprisals against an NGO, but also at Mr. Dolqun Isa for speaking out and raising human rights concerns. A previous attempt to bar Mr. Isa from participating at the UNFPII for alleged security reasons already took place last year and was documented in a report of the Secretary General on reprisals. We urge the members of this committee to oppose the attempted withdrawal of status. This committee cannot allow itself to be used to carry out reprisals against NGOs who are simply exercising their right to address human rights concerns openly. But we welcome that, in accordance with the rules, that the NGO will be heard. We are celebrating this year the 70th anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I urge you to continue and uphold its principles. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of Germany for your remarks. Now I give the floor to the representative of the European Union. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The European Union shares the strong concerns that have been expressed regarding the proposal to remove the ECOSOC accreditation of the Society for Threatened Peoples. That concern is based both on the manner in which the proposal has been put forward and the weight of the evidence that is furnished to support it. The NGO committee has been requested to take a decision based on the precipitous circulation of a note verbal at the end of last week, only several working hours before the commencement of the committee's session. This is not a convincing approach to such a serious matter where new and compelling facts are not involved. The reliance on accusations of terrorism in relation to an organization that has been vested with ECOSOC status since 1993, an organization that is engaged in human rights work that may not always find favor with governmental authorities, deserves real scrutiny. Where the authorities of a government, in this case Germany, do not have cause to give credence to such serious accusations, the foundation of such claims must be in real doubt. It should also be recalled that the case of Dolqun Isa was highlighted as an instance of reprisal in the Secretary-General's 2017 report, as has been mentioned, on cooperation with the United Nations, its representatives and mechanisms in the field of human rights. The EU urges the NGO Committee to avoid taking an untoward decision on this case and to refrain from seeking to remove this organisation's accreditation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of the European Union for your remarks. I see the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, dear colleagues. With regard to this item, we would like to say that we have listened very carefully and we have studied what has been said by the delegation of China, and we would like to say that the view of the Chinese delegation on this, Society for Threatened Peoples, is a very serious one, and there are some historical elements. And we've also listened to the arguments put forward by the US and the European Union. And we have respect for the fact that this organization perhaps plays an important and fruitful role in the ECOSOC platform. And however, these arguments are now relegated to the background because the organization which receives consultative status in ECOSOC is not just given rights to participate in the meetings of ECOSOC and its subsidiary bodies, but also it takes upon itself responsibilities. The responsibilities to observe the UN Charter and the requirements for security which are incumbent upon them, and not allow for any cases whereby, under its so-called umbrella, people might come through who are engaged in terrorist activities. We take a very serious view of this, and we would like to thank the delegation of China for its flexibility with regard to the fact that we're now being given until Friday to get in touch with this organization. We think this is a correct approach, and though if there are any reaffirmations of what has been said, we will have to act against having this organization be given consultative status. Thank you.
Agradezco al distinguido.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Russian Federation for his statement. On my list, I see Pakistan, Cuba, and Israel. Pakistan has the floor.
Thank you so much, Chair, and good morning to colleagues. My delegation has listened to the discussion that is going on in this chamber. We remain concerned that one delegation here has raised a very serious allegation with regards to activities of an organization which already has a consultative status. And we believe that allegations such as terrorism should not be taken lightly, even if an NGO has a consultative status. And we agree with the approach that the Chinese colleague has recommended to the committee, that we must give time to the organization to respond. And by this way, we believe that we'll not only follow the principle of transparency, but also follow the due process of law, because if there are allegations and which are serious in nature in terms of terrorism, they must be asked to respond. At the same time, we would urge the committee not to make this debate a political one. We understand that the issue of human rights defenders is important, and at times debate can go to a different dimension. But we can wait till Friday because we have given time to the organization, and we can follow the debate thereon. But making it political debate at this point in time will not serve the best interest of the committee. So that's our consideration at this moment. Thank you.
Gracias al
I thank the distinguished representative of Pakistan for his statement. I call the distinguished representative of Cuba. Thank you very much, sir. My delegation has taken the note verbal circulated by the delegation of China, circulated to the members of the committee. This was circulated Friday afternoon. We've taken it very seriously. And the situation we're in is the following. We must assume the responsibilities of the committee very seriously. We have heard some delegation who've referred to procedural matters and inappropriateness too, about how things have proceeded. As far as the note verbal is concerned, we've noted that the presentation of the note verbal, the circulation of the note by the Secretariat, abides by the rules of procedure of the committee in a very strict way. In earlier situations, this is the way things are done. This way, the members of the committee are informed of the request of a... Therefore, we don't understand why some delegations have said that there's inappropriate procedures. Also, we'd like to thank the delegation of China. In accordance with the practices of this committee, they are not trying to pressure the members of the committee to reach a decision today. No. Our understanding is that the delegation of China is once again acting in accordance with practices, giving time to delegations so that everybody can get information and find out what's necessary and consult their capitals. That is completely in keeping with the practices of this committee. Once again, we would thank the delegation of China. We will consider very seriously the information that is in the note verbal, and on Friday we will be prepared to reach a decision. Thank you.
Go.
I thank the distinguished delegation of Cuba for his statement. I call on the distinguished delegation of Israel.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be short. I just would like to thank you, the U.S. and Germany, for their explanation, for sharing the information about their perception about this NGO with us. And I agree with the proposal made by U.S. To postpone the discussion to Friday till we have more time to examine the accusations represented here by China. Thank you.
Gracias por su declaración.
I thank the distinguished delegation of Israel. Iran is on my list, and a number of others are on my list too. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In fact, I also should be very brief on the request of member states with concerns on terrorism and the activities of an NGO. In that line, I think that the concern should be taken very seriously by the committee. The NGO status does not and should not withhold the NGO committee from its role of reviewing activities of an NGO with the status based on the resolution of 1996-31. Provisions, and we also appreciate China's approach for giving this opportunity of hearing the response and hearing from the NGO concern, and then of course the NGO committee would take proper action. And we should not confuse issues here. In fact, the issue of reprisal and the issue of terrorism are not in the same level, and member states should be very careful when bringing arguments against a legitimate concern of a member state. And unfortunately, we have seen members of some renowned terrorist organizations are freely active in some countries that are arguing otherwise now. And that is, in fact, increasing our concern and validating our points that member states should be given opportunity to hear and to make decisions concerning the activities, the not appropriate activities of a given NGO with status of ECOSOC. I thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran for that statement. The distinguished representative of China has the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The UN ambassador is ready to speak, I think. I think that probably I should listen to her first, and then I will speak later.
Translation, please.
Can you hear? Can you hear? Can you hear, Chair? Chair.
Estaba con el uso de la palabra del
Distinguished representative of China has the floor. Then the United States and the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank the statements made by the committee members, including Germany and EU. First of all, procedurally, on Friday morning, we sent the note verbal. Morning of Friday, we sent the note. And today also, we agreed that we would give this organization opportunity to provide a written response. So we believe that what we have done is in accordance with the rules of the committee and also its practices. Secondly, for the colleague from Israel, I hope that you would not only listen to the comments of Germany and EU, you should also take a very careful look at our note. It's very evident from the note. This individual and that organization are not only they not only engage in terrorist activities or support terrorist activities. They have been involved in acts which undermine the integrity, territorial integrity and sovereignty of member states. Thirdly, when he was attending the UN meetings, he actually violated the rules of the UN, so there is a demerit on his part. So I think that all this are adequate for us to ask for a revocation of the consultative status of this organization. Thirdly, this request of China has nothing to do with reprisal. What we are asking here is to defend the purpose and the principles of the United Nations and to defend the rules of the UN. The purpose is also to maintain international peace and security, as well as the security and safety of the UN. So the U.S. delegate mentioned the SG's report. We know that we know who drafted this report. The draft of this report is designated as the reprisal coordinator. Because of this position, this individual tries to expand the mandate, and he takes a reprisal perspective on everything. An English saying goes like, when you have a hammer, then you seize everything as a nail. I think that that works the same with that coordinator. So that's why we believe that it has nothing to do with reprisal. Fourthly, the U.S. representative said that the U.S. gave a visa to this individual, This shows that he is risk-free. If we look at history, a lot of the terrorist activities happened on the soil of the US. What about those terrorist criminals? They might be US nationals, or they have been given or granted the US visas. So obtaining the US visa does not mean that this individual is safe. Then, the German ambassador said that he is a American. He's a German, a national of Germany. That was after he went to Germany. Before he left China, he committed a lot of crimes. He conducted many terrorist activities. Either Germany is not aware of this, or you choose to look the other way. In addition to that, even if he is a German national or he is given a German visa, this does not mean he is risk-free. Oh, sorry. He is having a German passport. This does not mean that he is safe. From German newspapers, we have learned that there were individuals who went to Syria or Iraq as ISIS members from Germany. There were about 940 plus individuals. About 2/3 are German nationals. They have the German nationality. So in this sense, that a German nationality or a German passport doesn't mean that this individual is not a terrorist or he is safe. Talking about counterterrorism, we believe that it is important to avoid double standards in counterterrorism. Some individuals may not pose security threat to Germany or US, but this does not mean that he or she is not a terrorist. Because this individual might pose security threat to China or other countries. Then we should have the unified standards, and then based on these standards, we should define this individual as a terrorist, and then we should crack down upon the terrorists with the same standards. So this individual is of security threat to other countries, and then it seems to be in the interest of certain other countries, and then these individuals are described or defined as human rights defenders. For this individual, on his own social media pages, he often incites a so-called holy war against China. So we can find all these evidences from his social media pages. We hope that countries like the US and Germany would avoid using double standards or wearing colored glasses when looking at these individuals. I hope that you can really carefully assess whether what we say is true or not. Finally, the German ambassador just now mentioned that the Interpol has already cancelled the red notice against this individual. To our knowledge, this act of cancellation was totally initiated by the Secretary General, who is German, and the director of the legal department of Interpol, who is an American. And when they were doing that, they didn't really consult with the member states, and let alone China. So this is out of political motivations, and it's unhanded, a total dark box operation. As a member of the committee, we have these concerns, and we raise the concerns. At the same time, we also give this organization opportunity to make responses. So I hope that in a professional and responsible manner, the committee should not be so nervous. And turn this issue into a political issue. So let's wait for the answers by Friday, and then we'll seriously consider this issue. Thank you very much.
Agradezco.
I thank the distinguished representative of the People's Republic of China for his statement. I now call on the distinguished representative of the United States of America.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a very sad and disappointing day to see this committee, and in particular members of this committee who espouse to uphold the tenets of Islam, indulging in the Chinese delegation's Islamophobia today, in which they conflate the efforts of an individual to advance the religious and human rights of a persecuted minority in China with terrorism, without providing any substantiated evidence. And I want to quote from the resolution of the NGO Committee and Consultative Relationships. And it requires that there exist, quote, substantiated evidence. That is also part of the rules of this committee. Evidence must be substantiated. There seems to be a belief that the United States does not take its responsibilities as the host country of the United Nations headquarters very seriously, that we just let known terrorists enter the United States willy-nilly to come and hang out here at the UN without any regard for the safety of our own citizens. We have been hearing from the Chinese government for many years now about their accusations about this individual and the organization that he is affiliated with, the World Uyghur Congress, including the same kind of allegations they've made in this letter. We have repeatedly asked them to provide us with evidence substantiating these allegations. At no point have they ever provided us with any actionable intelligence that would indicate that what they are saying is true. At no point. To this end, the United States has provided Mr. Isa, a German citizen in good standing with no criminal record, a 10-year multi-entry visa to the United States. Officials of the United States routinely meet with Mr. Isa. Again, if Mr. Isa were, in fact, an actual terrorist responsible for the many acts that the Chinese government has accused him and his organization of, does anyone in this room seriously believe we have troops on the line, young American men and women on the line in Syria right now fighting against ISIS and jihadist extremists? Do you seriously think we would be inviting this individual into this country and giving him free rein to travel about it? Give me a break. This is clearly an incident of the Chinese government using its position on this committee and its friends in this committee to engage in a reprisal against an individual. I would like to read from an editorial that appeared in the Washington Post yesterday describing how China treats the Uyghur minority in Xinjiang. China is undertaking a repugnant campaign to destroy the identity of a minority people, the Uyghur Muslims of Xinjiang in the northwest, in the province in the far northwest. There have been a number of well-documented articles, and this editorial goes on to quote them. In a series of recent interviews, the Post and the Associated Press with former prisoners in the camps describe mind-numbing drills in which they are forced to denounce their Uyghur culture as backward, to repudiate their Muslim beliefs, and to apologize for wearing long clothes, praying, teaching the Quran to their children, or asking imams to name their children. Many of these reports were documented by looking at Chinese procurement requests on Chinese websites, by the Chinese government websites, where they requested companies to participate in tender offers to build the concentration camps, re-education camps that the Chinese are using to re-educate between several 100,000 and 1 million Uyghur citizens of China. This is what this is about today. Let's please not make any mistake about what we are talking about today. This is not about the Society for Threatened Peoples and their contributions to the United Nations. This is about the temerity that they have to allow an individual who is silenced in China, and a whole community, frankly, that is silenced in China, to speak out on behalf of the rights of that community. Isn't this what the UN is all about? Isn't this the whole organization here to promote self-determination also? I think that we owe it to ourselves as a committee and to the UN to ask the Chinese if they have genuine evidence of this individual's culpability for the acts of which he is accused, then they should produce that to DSS and make sure that he's never allowed in the UN again, or to the United States so that we can make sure that he is not allowed in the United States again. But so far they have failed to do so. Therefore, accusing the Society for Threatened Peoples, a long-standing, well-regarded NGO, of harboring a terrorist and promoting terrorism is beyond the pale today. This is just outrageous. And I would hope that the Chinese would have the sense to withdraw this request before this goes any further. Thank you.
Agradezco a la distinguida. I thank the distinguished representative of the United States of America for her statement. I call on the United Kingdom. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Let me just say from the outset that the United Kingdom aligns itself with the statement delivered by the European Union. I would just say very briefly, as an observer of this committee, that it would seem extremely unfortunate to see it moving at the speed of lightning when attempting to revoke an accreditation, when it seems to move so very slowly when it considers new accreditations, especially for NGOs involved with human rights. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for his statement. I now call on the distinguished representative of the People's Republic of China once again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I listened carefully to the passionate statement by Ambassador Kerry. I can understand why she was so passionate, she was so emotional, because as far as I know, I don't know whether this information is correct or not. Before she was the ambassador, she participated in the so-called Xinjiang project initiated by the think tank in the United States. While this so-called Xinjiang project has as its aim to help those separatist activities for the independence of Xinjiang. And I suspect she has a close contact with those people.
Vamos. Point of order.
有一个程序方面的问题。
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we've just hit a new low in the committee, but to launch a personal attack against the U.S. ambassador is completely inappropriate. If the Chinese representative wants to talk about the substance of his complaint about an NGO or something relevant, then he should be allowed to proceed. But to launch a personal attack against the U.S. ambassador is completely inappropriate. And I hope that you, as chair, will not allow this to occur in this chamber. I have never seen such outright disrespect in all of my years in the NGO committee. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the United States. I'd like to ask the distinguished representative of the People's Republic of China to confine himself to concrete aspects of his information about the NGO. And please don't go on to other matters that are not related to the question. Please take into account other things that have been said in the committee regarding the withdrawal of the status of the organization, but we mustn't get into a political discussion. Thank you.
谢谢主席.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I don't think I had any personal attack against her. Next, I'd like to talk about some specific information. First of all, just now, the ambassador mentioned the so-called discrimination by the Chinese government against the ethnic minorities. And also she used a very bad word. That was her consistent practice to naming other people, to show that she was politically correct by giving people names. The Chinese government has always paid attention to and protected the rights of all the ethnic minorities, including the Uyghur people. We respect their religious freedom, and we respect the freedom of speech. We have made huge investment to help with the social economic growth of the ethnic minorities. The Uyghur and other ethnic minorities in Xinjiang had seen the best protection of their human rights in history. Just now, the ambassador read an editorial. But we all know that for a long time, those so-called media had a lot of bias against China. They focused on finding faults with China, instead of taking a very comprehensive and objective perspective in covering China. And the facts in those editorials are unfounded. And hear and say, a long time ago, we have abolished the re-education system through labor, re-education through labor system. This is the first point. The second point, she constantly said that she hoped that China can provide evidence. In fact, we have submitted a lot of evidence, a lot of information. But as I mentioned just now, due to the double standards applied in counterterrorism by some countries, those information evidence submitted by China are not looked at very carefully, or some people totally ignore those evidence and information because they know that this person doesn't pose any security threat to them. But this person and this organization engage in criminal activities in China. all of these are evidence enough to show that they may pose security threat to China and to many other countries. So now the critical issue here is some countries, when it comes to counterterrorism and when it comes to human rights, they politicize the issue and they apply double standards. Those things that are not good for them, they will stick to the principles, so-called principles. But when things is beneficial to China or to countries that are not their friends, they will distort the facts. I think we need to take the discussion back to the root in accordance with the rules and procedures of the committee, and we can wait until Friday to have a discussion on this issue instead of politicizing this issue. And we shouldn't get too emotional about it either. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of China for his statement. I would like it if the committee could act in accordance with our rules of procedure. We should not make this hall become a debating society. No, there are many opinions, many countries. The situation is very serious. The one that we're considering is very serious. I have heard, that is, if my understanding of everything is correct, I've heard many arguments from different sides. And I think we've really exhausted the issue. We've done enough. We said enough. And I think now we have all the information that we need to analyze the situation on Friday as we have planned. Distinguished delegates, I now would invite you to turn to item 6, other related issues. I'd like to draw your attention to those organizations that would like to be heard by the Economic and Social Council in accordance with Resolution 1996 and Article 84 of the Rules of Procedure. The list appears in document E/2C2 2018 CRP .41. May I take it that the committee recommends that the Council hear these organizations? I hear no objections. It is so decided. Thank you very much. Distinguished delegates, I now would invite you to consider agenda item 3B, new applications for consultative status and new requests for reclassification. I see that the distinguished delegation of Cuba would like to have the floor. I call on you. Thank you very much, sir. My delegation would like to draw your attention to item 6 of the work program, which has to do with a schedule, and it was adopted, and the committee is to consider it. Item C, revision of the working methods of the committee, and other items. My understanding is that this committee, informally, has been reviewing requests, applications sent in by various member states, and my delegation considers that if there were some sort of framework within which we could formally deal with questions of this kind, it is precisely under this agenda item. This is a concern of my delegation. Is a clarification required from the Secretariat? I think the committee or the Secretariat might have something to say should the committee, in a formal meeting, express its views about formal proposals and other requests? Thank you very much. I thank the distinguished representative of Cuba, the representative of the Secretariat, Marc-André, may wish to comment.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, sir. In the work calendar, delegations have this before them. Item 6 says that we should discuss this morning. Now, this is about the work program which has been adopted, which the committee adopted. Under this, we can discuss this issue now. Thank you. I thank Mr. Marc-André for his clarification. We've discussed this with the Secretariat. We see, after Cuba's statement, that due to the changes that there have been in the program, as a result of the statements that were made earlier by members, we have omitted agenda item 2. I would like to propose, if there are no objections, that we revert to this, that we give people a chance to make general statements. Members and observers or others could make statements that they might wish to make in this connection. The floor is open for this option. Anybody wishing to make any statements about general statements on this subject or any other considerations may feel free to do so. If there's no desire to speak, we will now proceed to item 3. Distinguished delegate of the European Union has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm afraid I do have a general statement on behalf of the European Union, but I'll make it quite brief. The EU attaches great importance to the effective and transparent functioning of the NGO Committee. The Committee's work to recommend the accreditation of NGOs to ECOSOC places it at the forefront of facilitating civil society in the UN, a role that takes on an extra dimension when the global outlook for civil society is taking a bleak turn. There are numerous authoritative reports which conclude that civil society is increasingly being constricted in many countries across the globe. Civil society participation in the UN must be characterized by openness and inclusion rather than by the holding up of a mirror to global shortcomings. The EU congratulates states that have secured election to the NGO Committee for the period 2019 to 2022 and trusts that they will endeavour through their membership to support the vital work of civil society in the UN context. We welcome the positive steps that have been taken to enhance openness in the committee, including webcasting and the forthcoming consultation with NGOs on 22nd June, the first of its kind, in compliance with paragraph 61A of Resolution 1996/31. We encourage further steps to instill confidence in the workings of the committee, including a readiness to hear the voices of civil society by way of a general statement early in the proceedings of each committee session, as has been the practice in the past. We also encourage the committee to ensure that in all its deliberations, the letter and spirit of ECOSOC Resolution 1996/31 is adhered to, and that deserving NGOs who fulfill the necessary criteria do not have their ambitions to serve in a UN context thwarted by undue or politically motivated considerations. The full spectrum of civil society voices must be heard within the UN walls. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank the distinguished representative of the European Union for his statement. I now call on the representative of Denmark.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to speak as an observer to the committee, which Denmark, along with many others, attach great importance to. The committee has an essential role to play in making sure that the United Nations and its member states have access to the advice and expertise from civil society. The active participation of NGOs should not be seen as undermining the will of member states, but rather as a vital element of support to the effective and healthy functioning of the UN system. It is crucial that the work of the committee is conducted in a fair, transparent, and efficient manner. We acknowledge that decisions to recommend to ECOSOC to grant the consultative status to NGOs must be considered carefully, and further information can be needed before the committee is ready to make a decision. but the many examples of repeated deferrals of NGOs by the committee raises serious concerns. The blocking of individual organizations and the unnecessarily long approval times weakens the legitimacy of the committee itself. With tendencies of increased limitation on an independent and active civil society in many places of the world, as well as increased reporting on reprisals and intimidations against human rights defenders and other civil society actors, it is vital that the UN takes a lead in defending NGOs. The NGO committee must fulfill its responsibility in this regard. We welcome the discussion on working methods that the committee has concluded in its last session, and we're looking forward to seeing concrete follow-up by the committee and progress in its way of working. I thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Denmark for his statement. I now call on the representative of Estonia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Civil societies and non-governmental organizations are vital partners to the governments in the international system. Their involvement is also a crucial aspect in the work of the United Nations. The Secretary General has frequently affirmed that the role of the civil society organizations is more important than ever in helping the UN reach its goals. For these reasons and beyond, it is imperative that the UN, in particular the NGO Committee, explores means to widen and make its processes more accessible and meaningful to the civil society organizations. In this regard, we commend the committee's step to hold its first consultations with NGOs on the 22nd of June. This helps to strengthen the framework laid down in the Economic and Social Council resolution of 1996/31. Estonia is pleased, having been elected to the 22nd term of the NGO Committee. We hope that our wide experience of the cooperation with the civil society in the UN and elsewhere in the international arena allows us to bring in an extra value to the committee. We strongly support the aspirations of the consultative status of the NGOs that have an established record of activities in devotion to the goals of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We find it is important that civil society organizations with consultative status are able to participate and address members during the session of the committee. Ultimately, this would reflect commitment of the committee to the spirit, principles, and aspirations of the UN Charter. As a soon joining member of the committee, Estonia strongly supports the improvement of the working methods of the NGO committee so that it can fulfill its core duty in its entirety. We should not forget that in processes of deliberation, policy formation, and policy execution, NGOs can offer data, insight, and consultation that could otherwise be overlooked. Therefore, it is of utmost importance that the committee lives up to its responsibility of making decisions as effectively, quickly, and responsibly as possible, that way increasing the number of the organizations accredited. Mr. Chair, we urge the committee to always defend and uphold the guiding principles agreed by all of us in the resolution 1996/31. We look forward to have constructive cooperation with the members of this committee and colleagues in the NGO branch at the beginning of the next year. Finally, I would like to ask this statement to be made part of the official record of the resumed session of the committee. I thank you.
Agradezco a la distinguida.
I thank the distinguished representative of Estonia for her statement. I now call on the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We fully align with the statement given earlier by the European Union and wish to add a few additional points in our national capacity. We warmly welcome the committee's inaugural consultations with NGOs due to take part on 22nd June. We look forward to attending and participating in this important dialogue between civil society and the committee as envisioned in 1996/31. And we hope that it will facilitate a fruitful exchange of views on the evolving relationship between NGOs and the United Nations. Civil society has a valuable role to play in informing our work in all UN fora. We welcome the participation of civil society in ongoing discussions in all areas of the UN's work. We also wish to congratulate the new and returning members of the committee on their election and underscore our expectation that they will work to promote civil society participation and ensure that NGOs granted consultative status reflect the full spectrum of issues of concern to ECOSOC and the United Nations. Clearly, this includes the fundamental pillar of human rights. We continue to be concerned by apparent discrimination preventing a number of NGOs with a human rights focus from gaining accreditation in a timely and impartial manner. We were pleased to be one of the 42 member states who signed the joint statement on working methods during the regular session in January. We particularly look forward to hearing how the committee intends to follow up on this conversation and further details of plans to improve the functioning and effectiveness of this body. As the committee's workload increases, its function of reviewing applications in an efficient, timely manner is even more necessary. Indeed, we were concerned to see in the regular session that the committee did not have time to reconsider applications from NGOs which had responded to questions. This imposes an unfair delay on NGOs which have been efficient and diligent in responding to the committee's questions, setting their applications back for another 5 months. Committee members have ample time before, during, and after formal committee sessions to review applications and responses submitted by NGOs, and to prepare questions to ensure that the committee is able to consider as many applications as possible during the session. As this will be the final full committee session under the able guidance of our Uruguayan chair, we would like to thank you and your team for your Herculean efforts to ensure the smooth running of this committee, and for trying to ensure the efficient discharge of its duties. The mandate of this committee is to promote civil society participation at the UN, and you've embodied this. You'll be leaving big shoes to fill next year. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and we ask that this statement is duly reflected in the report of the committee.
Muchas gracias.
I thank the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom for her statement. I now call on the distinguished delegate of Canada.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. As an engaged and active observer of this committee, Canada would like to take this opportunity to convey the importance that it places on the work of the committee. We appreciate the chance to discuss the working methods, and we look forward to the consultation taking place on June 22nd. We firmly believe that civil society participation enhances the work of the UN. NGOs regularly provide creative solutions, convey crucial information to and from organizations and individuals on the ground, possess valuable expertise and understanding of the local context in which they operate, and help ensure that the UN delivers on its aim of leaving no one behind. We believe that a diversity of voices at the UN enriches our discussions and ensures that various viewpoints are considered. An inclusive system benefits us all. The NGO Committee plays a crucial role in giving civil society a voice in the UN system. We look forward once again to engaging during this session in support of this objective. Thank you.
Muchas gracias al distinguido representante.
I thank the distinguished representative of Canada. I call on the distinguished representative of the United States of America and then Australia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify that we would please ask that the content of the statement that I made earlier today be reflected as part of the official record as a general statement. Thank you.
Agradezco a la distinguida representante del...
I thank the distinguished representative of the United States. We'll take note of your request. I call on the distinguished representative of Australia.
Thank you, Chair. Australia is a long-standing supporter of the crucial work of this committee in ensuring effective and broad-based civil society participation in United Nations processes. The Australian government highly values the important role that the civil society plays in promoting and protecting human rights around the world. Civil society enriches our discussions with independent and diverse perspectives and expertise. They help ensure accountability, and they connect reality on the ground with the work we do in the United Nations. Civil society has consistently demonstrated that its participation helps improve the effectiveness, accountability and transparency and the overall legitimacy of the United Nations. And we urge the committee to respect the significant contribution civil society can make and to support their participation in this committee. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias.
I thank you very much. I thank Australia very much. The representative of civil society wishes to speak. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I welcome this opportunity to address the Committee of NGOs in name of...
Perdón, veo punto de orden de...
Point of order from the delegation of China and Russia. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we are running out of time, and we should move to the next agenda. I think we have already provided opportunity for the civil society to interactive dialogue with the committee on 22nd of June. So I think it will be the better time for the NGOs to participate actively in that dialogue. Thank you.
I thank the representative of China. The distinguished representative of the Russian Federation has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We would also like to call upon the committee strictly to adhere to its agenda for today's meeting. And we understand the NGOs and the observers' intentions to make statements of a general nature, but we take it that we cannot have the discussion go beyond the framework of observers because we will not have time effectively to carry out our work in considering the various applications and organizations. And we would also like to recall that on the 22nd of July, there will be consultations between members of the committee and NGOs who already have consultative status with ECOSOC. And we hope then that these organizations, which would like to speak now, would also obtain an invitation, and we could respond to it. Thank you.
Gracias.
I thank the Russian Federation. Uruguay has the floor. Thank you very much, sir. Uruguay supports the right of civil society to be heard at the meetings of the committee. We've always defended that right. We will continue to defend that right. We'd like to emphasize that when we were a member, as long as we've been a member here, non-governmental organizations should be allowed to speak during the beginning of each session. We regret that at recent meetings, some have not been allowed to speak, denying them, that is, the fundamental right to speak. We would repeat that there are precedents from earlier statements. 2 years ago, the same organization, International Service for Human Rights, made a statement on behalf of the 100 NGOs. It's disturbing that in the committee there are those who are opposed to the right of certain to be heard. This is a step backwards in the area of transparency, and it hurts the relationship between civil society and the committee. Our mandate is to tighten bonds between non-governmental organizations and the United Nations system. We cannot understand, we cannot accept why civil society will not be given the right to speak. Uruguay is a member of the ACT group. We believe in accountability and transparency. We defend these principles in all areas of the United Nations. For this reason, we also defend these rights here in this committee. We believe that the participation of civil society will contribute to give greater transparency here, and there will be better communication between the committee and the NGOs because of this. Mr. President, in other words, my delegation believes that the contribution that can be made by civil society in its statement will contribute to improved working methods in the committee. This will give us a chance to learn about their points of views, their expectations, and their experience. At the same time, we believe that there are rules of procedure in the committee and in ECOSOC. This is a subsidiary body which emphasizes right to be heard by civil society. Paragraph 32 of Resolution 1931 and Article 84 of the Rules of Procedure of ECOSOC. For these reasons, and because the right to be heard is a fundamental right, we, especially in areas where you have the fundamental pillars involved, human rights and maintenance of peace and security and development, in this area, we support the right to be heard, and we hope that in future meetings with the new members, to whom we wish good luck, that you will support civil society be heard in this committee. Finally, we'd like to ask that our statement be included in the report. Thank you very much. I thank the distinguished representative of Uruguay for her statement. The distinguished representative of the United States of America now has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, this body voted during the January 2017 regular session to grant NGOs with consultative status a speaking slot during the opening session to address the NGO committee. Furthermore, Resolution 1996-31 grants NGOs with consultative status the ability to address the Council and the committee. We ask our colleagues on the committee to adhere to 1996-31 and the commitments this committee made during this previous vote in January 2017, and to allow this NGO to address the committee. We have followed this practice in the past when the International Service for Human Rights previously addressed this body, and we are concerned that the committee would be reversing this practice. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
I thank the distinguished representative of the United States of America. I call on Canada.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. We are very disappointed that once again an NGO is being prevented from taking the floor to make a statement in this committee. We firmly support the ability of NGOs to make their voices heard here at the UN as independent actors in their own right, including here in this very committee. It is indeed ironic that in the committee tasked with enabling civil society participation at the UN, civil society is blocked from making a brief statement. It is important that going forward, civil society organizations with consultative status are able to address members during the committee session, and that we foster a safe and enabling environment in which civil society can thrive. Thank you.
Gracias al distinguido representante. I thank the distinguished representative of Canada, distinguished representative of Austria.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll be very brief. Our colleague from Uruguay has very eloquently explained the reason why we also support this. And allow me one additional comment. I'm very aware that I'm just an observer, so allow me to observe some things. It's very interesting that session after session, with the reasons of saving time, we spend half an hour, 2 hours, sometimes more, discussing whether to allow civil society, and this is the NGO committee, to have a statement that would last probably 2 minutes. Civil society is acting very responsibly in coming together with an agreed statement on behalf of many organizations. So it does not seem that we serve the object of the committee very well by discussing whether we have the time to listen to a statement that would only take 2 minutes and that we waste hours and hours upon this. I believe that having consultations on 22nd June is a big step forward. Nevertheless, this should not keep us from listening to the important voice of civil society during the sessions as well, so that we can then base our work also on their perspectives on this. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias al distinguido.
I thank the distinguished representative of Austria. I call on the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to completely agree with my colleague from Austria, and in our own regard, it's deeply regrettable that despite being given the floor by the Chair and her beginning her statement, we were not able to hear the rest of the statement from the representative from ISHR this morning on the basis of a very unclear point of order, especially when there's clear past precedent for them to do so, and indeed a number of members have cited that precedent. This committee works hard to consider applications from NGOs for accreditation exactly so that they can participate and enrich our work. When an organisation such as ISHR has been granted this accreditation, there's no reason they should be blocked from addressing this committee. Thank you.
Muchas gracias a la distinguida.
I thank the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom. I call on the distinguished representative of Greece.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to waste your time, so I'll be brief. I just want to let you know that Greece aligns itself with the statements made by Uruguay and the US. We fully support. We truly believe that the voice of NGOs, of civil society in general, must be heard, especially NGOs with consultative status. Should be given the opportunity to address the Council. Thank you.
Muchas gracias al distinguido representante.
I thank the distinguished representative of Greece. I call on the distinguished representative of Australia.
Thank you, Chair. Australia would like to add our voice to those who have gone before and strongly support ISHR's application to speak at this session. We urge the committee members to respect the significant contribution civil society can make to debate in this committee. And again, we strongly agree with the statements that have been made in this regard.
Gracias a la distinguida representante de...
I thank the distinguished representative of Australia. Israel has the floor.
I will be brief. We also would like to add our voice to our colleagues here, and we would like to hear the voice of the NGO. We would like to hear their statement. Thank you.
Gracias a la distinguida...
I thank the distinguished representative of Israel. I thank all those of you who have spoken, working for transparency in the exercise of your legitimate rights. And now, if there are no further requests for the floor, we'll continue with our agenda.
Bien, distinguidos delegados.
Fine. Distinguished delegates, there doesn't seem to be a consensus regarding hearing civil society. We've heard all the arguments. Let us go to item 6. The distinguished delegate of Cuba referred to this, about our working methods. The issue is open, it would seem. We have to reach a decision on this before we go to 3B. So, the distinguished representative of Cuba has the floor. Thank you very much, sir. My delegation considers that your request that we not jump over agenda items is more than valid. It's very valid. We haven't heard all observers. Some obviously have the intention to participate in this process. Their declarations, well, some of them show a certain awareness of the working procedures here. Their requests haven't been heard. My delegation's request would be the following. We should consider valid what we've heard. We should act in accordance with what we've heard. We should work in accordance with our work program. Secondly, we'd like to put a question to the Secretariat. Could the Secretariat give us information about preparations for consultations with civil society? My delegation recalls that these consultations will go on, will continue, will exist for the first time. It's in the Resolution 1996/31-101A, and we have heard this delegation that wants to speak, speaking many times, it's been criticized. This type of dialogue has gone on since 1996. There's a bit of a contradiction here. We've heard certain statements by certain observers which criticize this committee, but our committee is trying to implement 1996/31. On this subject, we would appreciate very much if the Secretariat could report to us on how preparations are going, preparations for these consultations. bearing in mind that these consultations have two aspects. One, consultations, stage number one, the questionnaire which has been sent out to all NGOs with consultative status, and stage two, the meeting that we will be having. That's a request that I'd like to put. And secondly, last week, the committee informally analyzed the question of the list of consolidated sanctions in the Security Council. We'd like to say that we think this is the appropriate framework for reaching a decision on this subject. We'd also like to know if members of the committee would be prepared formally to analyze this question. It's a valid question. It was raised by one delegation, which is a member of the committee. So these are the general thoughts that we want to put forward in this connection. Thank you. I thank the distinguished representative of Cuba. Request for an explanation has been put to the Secretary. Representative of India, do you have something to add? You have the floor. India has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just wanted to support my colleague from Cuba regarding the question about the options available for screening of NGO applications for consultative status against the consolidated United Nations sanctions lists. We have discussed this question earlier during informals last week, and to our understanding, we have made some progress. We need some further information of technical nature. If those information could be provided during the session, then a firm decision on this issue could be expedited. We all understand that this is a very important issue, and if agreed, then this needs to be implemented from the regular session of 2019. So keeping that timeline in mind, my question to the Secretariat would be if it is possible to discuss this issue further with all the technical inputs and information that the committee members had requested during the informal session held last week, so that we can come to a firm conclusion on this subject. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of India. We'll take note of both statements. I now call on the representative of the Secretariat, Mr. Marc-André. He will give a clarification relating to these questions. Thank you very much.
Pour ce qui est de la réunion du 22 janvier.
22nd of January, or June, says the Speaker, rather, all the NGOs in consultative status with ECOSOC have received the note whereby the committee says that it has agreed that the NGOs can set a framework for consultation which will take place. They've had this document before them, a document which was translated into French and into Spanish, in addition to its original version in English. And they were also urged to make a written contribution on the various issues which the committee had agreed on, and which encompasses the debate and the thoughts we might have on this subject. These consultations have not come through to us because NGOs have till the end of the month to make their contributions in writing to this process. Now, regarding the meeting itself on the 22nd of June, which will take place in the Economic and Social Council chamber on the Friday of the 22nd of June in the morning, this also will be open-ended. NGOs with consultative status are invited to sign up. I cannot give you any figures yet on the number of individuals who have signed up. It's a bit early on in the process because we still have a month left. And overall, The registrations are spread over time, and as we get them, we will know further as we get closer to the date of the meeting. So this process is underway. Now, regarding the screening of NGO requests and the list on sanctions of the Security Council, the committee has had consultations on the item last Thursday, which were informal in nature. And I took it that a number of clarifications were requested and some information as well, which would come not necessarily from the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, but from other departments of the United Nations Secretariat, specifically political affairs, working on the follow-up of this list. It would seem to us difficult to obtain from these other bodies of the Secretariat of the United Nations the information requested in time for this meeting. First of all, we would have to organize consultations informally in addition, and we have up to the 30th of May a formal work program, an official one, which is already very heavy. And I think that I would have to take some time to go back into informals and look at the technical aspects and details which are provided by the bodies in the Secretariat of the United Nations, and then work on formalizing a decision on the part of the committee in the form of a draft resolution or decision, which also would have to be negotiated in informals by the committee before being submitted to a formal meeting for adoption. This is a process which I really don't think fits in with our work program as just adopted this morning. Thank you.
Gracias, agradecemos.
I thank Mr. Marc-André for his clarification. It's been very useful. I'm sure it will be useful for representatives of member states who have requested clarifications. Are there any further questions on the organization of this event? The representative of the Islamic Republic of Iran has the floor. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank Mr. Andre for his briefing. For the January meeting, is there any possibility, and have we indeed, sorry, June, you said first, I think, the translator, yeah. On the 22nd June meeting, is there any possibility, or have we indeed predicted any possibility for remote participation, online participation by NGOs, since it would not be possible for many, especially from South, to come in person? Will there be any opportunity for those NGOs also to engage with others and also with the members of the NGO committee? Thank you.
Gracias al distinguido representante de Irán.
I thank the representative of Iran. Once again, Mr. Marc-André has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are considering the possibilities of connecting with other duty stations of the United Nations. It appears that having a meeting on a Friday morning New York time creates some concrete problems in terms of finding, the appropriate time slot in the countries to which we could connect. So we may have to be a bit less ambitious than what we had originally planned, but we are still working on what is feasible given the date and the time of the meeting, and we will keep you updated on this. Thank you.
Muchas gracias al señor
I thank Mr. Marc-André very much for that clarification. The representative of China has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to ask a technical question to the Secretary regarding the interactive dialogue on 22nd June regarding the working language. because also China and other members of the committee raised this issue during the informal discussion, that we would like to use the 6 UN languages during this meeting. So I just want to ask the relevant arrangements for the interpretation. Thank you.
Gracias al distinguido representante.
I thank the distinguished representative of the People's Republic of China. I'd like to ask Mr. Marc-André once again to give an explanation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have on our side asked for the interpretation services for this meeting. They have been asked internally within the Secretariat. This being said, they will be provided on what is said to be an as-available basis, meaning provided that the services, the linguistic services, have the capacity to cover this meeting in addition to all official meetings that take place during that week at the UN, and there are many. Therefore, I cannot guarantee the provision of these services. It may not be provided if the capacity of, in particular, in the interpretation service is exhausted for that week. That's as much as I can say at this stage. Thank you.
Good morning, colleagues. It's always a pleasure to see you here again, all of you. I would like to thank Mr. Marc-André. Now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of China. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, the Secretary, for the clarification. But unfortunately, we think that if we cannot guarantee the 6 UN working language, it will. I mean, the effect of the dialogue will be will be affected, because it's unfair for some developing countries, some NGOs from developing countries. Activity participation in the dialogue. So we request the Secretary to guarantee this issue. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of China. Now I give the floor to the Secretariat. Mr. Marc-André, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wish I could guarantee the availability of these services. As you know, this meeting is not a calendar meeting, in the sense that it was not included in the calendar of conferences, which has been approved by the intergovernmental process. As a result, the interpretation was not planned for it. The availability of services may have some financial implications that also may not have been planned. And therefore, again, I cannot guarantee, but we will certainly work with our colleagues from the Department for General Assembly Affairs and Conference Management to stress the importance of the provision of linguistic services to this meeting, and to make their utmost to have these services provided. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Marc-André. Any other questions, issues? It appears none. So, distinguished delegates, I now invite the committee to begin its consideration of agenda item 3B, entitled New Applications for Consultative Status and New Request for Reclassification. The committee will begin with the organization contained in list 1, namely Anna Dek. I apologize. Now I recognize the distinguished representative of the United States. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a point of clarification. It didn't seem to me that we completed the discussion of the civil society organization that wanted to address the body. It seems that that was left open-ended. Was there a final decision made in that regard?
I thank the distinguished representative of the United States. As I remember, the chair before mentioned that we have no consensus on this issue. In this case, we have to go on and continue our consideration, the list one. United States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for that clarification.
Distinguished delegates, I would like to remind that we are now considering the organization, namely ANADEC. Distinguished representative from India, you have the floor, ma'am.
Just a point of clarification: is there an English version of this this questionnaire available? This full application? Because I see French and Russian, and the version that I see here on paperless is only French. Or
I would like to thank the distinguished representative of India. Now I give the floor to Marc-André. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately, the translation of the questions 3A, 5, and the budget is not available yet in other languages than Russian, and of course the original French. The document in the other versions should be available very soon. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Marc-André. Now I give the floor to the distinguished representative of India. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Marc-André, for offering this information. In view of this, that complete information is not yet available for all of us to see. Can we postpone the decision of the committee on this subject till it is available?
I thank the distinguished representative of India. As we have no complete information regarding this organization, especially the translation into other languages. So if there are no objections, we would like to postpone the consideration of this organization to a later date. If there are no objections, it is so decided. In this regard, we're going on to the next organization, namely AWWA Ltd. Are there any questions or comments regarding this NGO? I see none, so may I take it the committee wishes to recommend the special consultative status be granted to this organization. I hear no objections. It is so decided. The next organization is Action pour l'éducation et la promotion de la femme. Any questions or comments? I see none, so may I take it that the committee wishes to recommend the special consultative status be granted to this organization? I hear no objections. It is so decided. The next organization is APEEFA. I recognize the distinguished representative of China. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question regarding our working method. Because just now, when we reviewed the first NGO, that we postponed the review because of lack of documents. So I also found that maybe that NGO is not the only one that lacking this kind of documents. So will we proceed accordingly like that, or I don't know?
I think the distinguished representative of China. Now I give the floor to the Secretariat. Mr. Marc-André, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, we have a document containing the applications of 12 NGOs that are in French, originally in French, which has not been translated yet, although it is, I think, about to be released, so we can publish it on paperless very soon. And I will check whether there are any other documents, but as a result, there are, as it stands, 12 organizations originally whose application was in French, for which the translation is not provided. Thank you.
I thank Mr. Marc-André. So we can do as the committee decides. I mean, if there are any problems with the translation, we can also postpone all these organizations until we'll receive the translation. But if there are no problems, if it's very clear, so we can go on, I mean, consider all these organizations. So it's up to the committee. Are there any comments? China, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe we can deal with these 12 NGOs together at a later time, maybe.
I thank the distinguished representative of China. Now I give the floor to the representative of the United States. You have the floor, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do we anticipate that we would have the translation available during this session? Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the United States. Now I give the floor to Mr. Marc-André for the clarification.
Thank you. Yes, in fact, I can see that this document at 44 has just been released. So we should be in a position to put it on paperless very soon. Thank you.
As the same as the previous one, that was the first organization, let's skip this organization also as soon as we get the translation later, so we can get back to this organization. If there are no objections, I hear none, so it's so decided. Let's move on to the next organization. It's ASERV. Does any delegation like to ask a question or make any comment regarding this NGO? I see none, so may I take it that the committee wishes to recommend the special consultative status be granted to this organization? I hear no objections. It is so decided. The next organization is Akshar Foundation. Are there any questions or comments regarding this NGO? It seems none, so may I take it that the committee wishes to recommend the special consultative status be granted to this organization? I hear no objections. It is so decided. The next organization is Al Mehran Rural Development Organization. I recognize the distinguished representative of Pakistan. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you so much, Chair. According to the details provided by the organization, under question 3, it is stated that the organization was established in 1998. But the date of registration as provided in response to question 8 is 20th September 2017. Could organization state whether at some point in time it was working without registration itself with local authorities? Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Pakistan. Any other delegation would like to pose any question or make any comment regarding this NGO? It seems none. So we'll transmit this question to the organization, and the committee will be duly notified when the response is received.
I think it's done. Yes.
Distinguished delegates, I would like to notice that immediately after the meeting is adjourned at 1 p.m., I would like to convene a brief informal consultations to organize deferred applications into List 1 and List 2, as was done for new applications, and as a standard practice to facilitate the work of the committee. Distinguished delegates, the committee will continue its consideration of agenda item 3B, new applications for consultative status, and new request for the reclassification this afternoon at 3 p.m. in this conference room.
Members of the committee remain.
Yes, and I would like to ask the members of the committee to remain in their sittings and kindly ask the representative of civil society to come to and observer states also to come to our meeting at 3 p.m. Now you're free, and the meeting is adjourned.